What men over 60 consider great sex. 4 secrets women need to know. Linda sat in the coffee shop with her close friend Margaret, both women in their mid-60s, having one of those honest conversations that only decades of friendship allows. "I thought I understood what men wanted in bed," Linda admitted quietly. "40 years of marriage, I figured I knew. But now that I'm dating again after being widowed, I'm realizing that what I thought mattered to men actually doesn't. At least not the way I thought it did." Margaret leaned in. "What do you mean?" Linda hesitated, then continued. "Thomas told me something last week that completely changed my perspective. We'd been intimate a few times, and I was so anxious about my body, about whether I was doing things right, about keeping up with what I thought he expected. And he finally said, 'Linda, the best sex we've had was when you stopped performing and just enjoyed yourself. When you're present with me instead of in your head worrying, that's when it's incredible.'" That conversation represents a fundamental truth that most women over 60 don't understand. What men consider great sex at this stage of life has almost nothing to do with how you look like, how flexible you are, or whether you know complicated techniques. It's about something far simpler and far more powerful, but also something that many women struggle to provide because they're so busy worrying about the wrong things. Subscribe to this channel right now because we're about to reveal the 4 secrets about what men over 60 actually consider great sex. These aren't the things you'll read in magazine articles aimed at 20-year-olds. These are the truths that mature men wish women understood but rarely articulate clearly. And once you understand these 4 secrets, you'll stop wasting energy on things that don't matter and start focusing on what actually creates the kind of intimacy that men crave and remember.
Secret number 1. Men over 60 value genuine enthusiasm over physical perfection. This is the most important thing to understand, and it's the one thing most women over 60 get completely wrong. You worry about your body, the softness, the wrinkles, the scars, the changes that decades have brought. You dim the lights, you stay partially clothed, you apologize for how you look. And while you're drowning in self-consciousness, the man with you is desperately wishing you just relax and show him that you actually want to be there. Dr. Barry McCarthy, sex therapist specializing in mature sexuality, explains that for men over 60, physical arousal is deeply connected to psychological factors. Unlike younger men, who can be aroused primarily by visual stimulation, older men need to feel wanted, desired, chosen. When a woman is clearly self-conscious and uncomfortable, it doesn't matter how she looks. Her discomfort creates his discomfort, and arousal becomes difficult or impossible. Margaret was 67 when she started dating Robert. Their first few intimate encounters were awkward because Margaret was so focused on hiding her body and apologizing for how she looked. "I'm sorry, I know I'm not what I used to be," she'd say. Or, "I wish you could have seen me 20 years ago." Robert finally stopped her mid-apology. "Margaret, I'm not here with 20 years ago you. I'm here with now you. And when you keep apologizing for your body, you're telling me that you don't want to be here, that you're just tolerating this. That kills my desire faster than anything else." That honest feedback changed everything for Margaret. The next time they were intimate, she made a conscious choice to focus on pleasure rather than appearance, on being present rather than self-conscious. She let Robert see her enjoyment, her desire, her genuine enthusiasm for being with him. Robert's response was visceral and immediate. Later, he told her, "That was the best sex I've had in a decade. Not because you did anything technically different, but because I could feel that you actually wanted me, that you were fully there with me." Helen experienced this from a different angle. She was 66 and dating Richard, and she'd been anxious about intimacy because she'd gained weight since her divorce. But Richard was dealing with his own body image issues and some erectile challenges. What Helen discovered was that when she showed genuine enthusiasm, when she touched him eagerly, when she vocalized her pleasure, when she made it clear she desired him, his body responded in ways it didn't when she was quiet and self-conscious. "My enthusiasm helped him relax," Helen explained to her friend. "When he could see that I genuinely wanted him and enjoyed being with him, he stopped worrying about performance. And ironically, when he stopped worrying, everything worked better." Research from the Kinsey Institute confirms that men over 60 consistently rank partners' genuine desire and enjoyment as more important to sexual satisfaction than any physical factor, including their own erectile function. When a woman is clearly engaged, present, and enjoying herself, it creates psychological arousal that enhances physical response. But contrast this with what happened to Dorothy when she remained self-conscious throughout her intimate encounters with Michael. Dorothy kept the lights off, stayed partially clothed, was quiet and still. Michael eventually admitted he felt like he was imposing on her, like she was tolerating sex rather than enjoying it. Their intimate life dwindled because Michael couldn't maintain arousal with someone who seemed uncomfortable. Here's the secret. Your genuine enthusiasm, your visible enjoyment, your clear desire, these create arousal in ways your perfect body never could. Stop apologizing, stop hiding, stop performing being comfortable, and actually become comfortable by focusing on your own pleasure and connection rather than your appearance. The right man will be far more turned on by your genuine presence than by any physical perfection.
Secret number 2. Men over 60 want emotional connection during sex, not just physical release. This surprises many women because we've been taught that men separate physical and emotional intimacy, that sex is primarily a physical need for them. That might be somewhat true for younger men, but by 60, most men have discovered that sex without emotional connection is empty and unsatisfying. They want to feel close to you, seen by you, connected to you during intimacy. Dr. Sue Johnson, developer of emotionally focused therapy, explains that as men age, their capacity for emotional intimacy often deepens. They're less focused on conquest and performance and more interested in genuine connection. Sex becomes a form of emotional communication, not just physical gratification. Patricia was 65 when she realized this with David. They'd been intimate several times, and Patricia had been focusing on technique, on doing things she thought men liked. But David seemed increasingly distant afterward rather than closer. Finally, David said something that confused her initially. "Can we just slow down? Can we talk during this? I want to feel like I'm with you, not like you're executing a performance." Patricia adjusted her approach entirely. Instead of focusing on techniques, she focused on connection. She maintained eye contact. She talked to him, telling him how he made her feel, asking what he wanted, creating dialogue. She slowed down, prioritizing presence over progression. The transformation in David's response was dramatic. He became more engaged, more passionate, more emotionally available. And afterward, instead of rolling over and going to sleep, he wanted to stay connected, talking, holding her, remaining close. "I finally understood," Patricia told her sister. He didn't want a performance. He wanted intimacy, real, emotional, connecting intimacy where we're both fully present with each other. Carol experienced this understanding from the opposite direction. She was dating Kenneth, and their intimate life felt mechanical and disconnected. Kenneth would be physically present but emotionally absent, focused entirely on physical sensations without any emotional engagement. Carol felt used rather than desired, like a means to an end rather than a partner. When Carol finally addressed this, Kenneth dismissed her concern. "Sex is just physical. Why do you need to make it complicated?" That response told Carol everything she needed to know. Kenneth was emotionally unavailable, and their intimate life reflected that fundamental disconnection. Ruth, on the other hand, discovered this secret early with James. James would maintain eye contact during intimacy, talk to her, check in about what felt good, create moments of pause where they were just present together. The sex was slower, less frantic than what Ruth had experienced with younger partners, but it was infinitely more satisfying because it felt emotionally rich and deeply connecting. "We're making love," Ruth explained to her friend, "not just having sex. And there's a huge difference. He wants to connect with me, not just use my body. That makes everything more intense for both of us." Research published in the Journal of Sex Research found that men over 60 who report high sexual satisfaction consistently describe their experiences as emotionally intimate and deeply connecting. Physical pleasure alone doesn't create satisfaction at this age. Emotional connection during physical intimacy is what makes sex memorable and meaningful. Here's the secret. During intimacy, maintain eye contact. Talk to him. Not dirty talk necessarily, but real communication about what feels good, how he makes you feel, what you want. Create moments of pause where you're just present together. Touch him emotionally, not just physically. The connection you create during sex is what he'll remember and crave, far more than any specific physical act.
Secret number 3. Men over 60 want you to communicate clearly about what you want and need. This is where decades of conditioning often work against women. You've been taught to be accommodating, to prioritize his pleasure, to be quiet about your own needs. But men at this stage of life are often dealing with changes in their bodies, erectile challenges, delayed response, different arousal patterns, and they desperately need clear feedback about what's working and what isn't. Silence or fake enthusiasm leaves them guessing and anxious. Dr. Ian Kerner, sex therapist and author, explains that one of the most common sources of sexual anxiety for men over 60 is not knowing whether their partner is genuinely satisfied. When women stay silent or fake pleasure, men sense the dishonesty, and it creates performance anxiety that makes physical response even more difficult. Linda discovered this with Thomas. Their first few intimate encounters were pleasant, but not particularly satisfying for Linda. She stayed quiet, made encouraging sounds, didn't want to hurt Thomas's feelings by redirecting him, but Thomas sensed something was off. "Are you actually enjoying this?" he finally asked. "Because I can't tell, and it's making me anxious." That conversation opened up real communication. Linda started telling Thomas specifically what felt good and what she wanted more of. "A little higher, more pressure there. That feels amazing." Thomas was relieved rather than offended. "I can't read your mind," he said. "I need you to tell me what works for you. That's the only way I know I'm giving you pleasure." With clear feedback, their intimate life transformed. Thomas knew what Linda enjoyed, which made him more confident and relaxed. Linda was actually experiencing pleasure rather than politely tolerating touch that wasn't quite right. Both of them became more satisfied. Helen had a similar experience with Richard. Richard was dealing with some erectile challenges and was anxious about whether he could satisfy Helen. Helen's instinct was to reassure him that penetration wasn't important, but that generic reassurance didn't help because Richard didn't know what actually was important to her. So Helen got specific. "What feels incredible to me is when you touch me this way. That gives me more pleasure than anything else." That clear communication took the pressure off Richard to perform in ways his body was struggling with, and focused his attention on what actually created pleasure for Helen. Their intimate life became far more satisfying for both of them because they were communicating clearly rather than guessing. But contrast this with what happened to Dorothy with Michael. Dorothy never communicated her needs, and Michael never asked. Their intimate life was entirely focused on what Michael wanted, with Dorothy's pleasure being an afterthought at best. Eventually, Dorothy stopped wanting intimacy because it felt one-sided and unsatisfying. Michael was confused. He thought everything was fine because Dorothy had never said otherwise. Barbara had a different challenge. She was very vocal about what she didn't like, but never communicated what she did want. Kenneth felt criticized and anxious, like he couldn't do anything right. Barbara needed to shift from criticism to clear direction. Not "that's not working," but "I really love when you do this instead." Here's the secret. Men over 60 want clear, specific, positive communication during intimacy. Tell him what feels good. Guide his hands where you want them. Use your words to let him know what's working. This isn't being demanding or selfish. It's giving him the information he needs to actually please you, which is what he wants to do. Clear communication creates confidence, reduces anxiety, and makes intimacy satisfying for both partners.
Secret number 4. Men over 60 want you to initiate sometimes and show that you desire them. This might be the most surprising secret for women over 60, because we grew up in an era where men were expected to initiate and women were expected to respond. But at this stage of life, men are often dealing with anxieties about whether they're still desirable, whether their bodies still work reliably, whether you actually want them or are just accommodating them. When you initiate intimacy, when you make it clear that you desire him, it creates psychological arousal that's incredibly powerful. Dr. Tammy Nelson, sex therapist, explains that men's sexual confidence is deeply connected to feeling desired. When a woman initiates, she's communicating unmistakably that she wants him, which eliminates anxiety and creates arousal at a level that passive receptivity can never achieve. Margaret discovered this accidentally with Robert. One evening, she initiated intimacy directly, not by hinting or creating an environment and hoping he'd notice, but by explicitly saying, "I want you, right now." Robert's response was visceral and immediate. Later, he told her, "That was one of the most arousing moments of my life. Knowing that you actively wanted me, that you desired me enough to say it clearly, that made me feel more masculine and desirable than I felt in years." From that point forward, Margaret made a point of initiating regularly, sometimes verbally, "I've been thinking about you all day. Can we go to bed?" Sometimes physically, taking his hand and leading him to the bedroom. Sometimes with clear signals, "I'm going to take a shower. Want to join me?" Each time, Robert's response was enthusiastic and passionate. I realized he'd been carrying anxiety about whether I actually wanted him or was just being kind. When I initiate, I remove all doubt, and that certainty allows him to relax and be fully present. Patricia had a similar revelation with David. She'd been waiting for David to initiate, assuming that was his role. But David was dealing with some erectile challenges and was anxious about initiating only to potentially disappoint her. They were stuck in a pattern where neither was initiating because both were anxious. Patricia finally initiated directly, making it clear she desired him. The effect on David was transformative. He relaxed, engaged fully, and his body responded in ways it hadn't when he was anxious. Patricia realized that her initiation wasn't just nice for David, it was necessary for their intimate life to function well. Helen experienced this from the opposite direction with Richard. She would sometimes initiate, sometimes wait for him to initiate. But she noticed that their intimate encounters were far more satisfying when she was the one who initiated. When she asked Richard about this, he was honest. "When you initiate, I know without any doubt that you want this. When I initiate, there's always a little voice in my head wondering if you're just going along with it because you feel obligated. That anxiety affects everything." But contrast this with Dorothy's experience with Michael. Dorothy never initiated. She waited for Michael to always make the first move, to pursue, to seduce. Over time, Michael felt like he was always chasing, always proving himself, always facing potential rejection. The pressure wore him down, and eventually he stopped initiating as frequently because he was tired of feeling like he was imposing on Dorothy. Carol learned this lesson when Kenneth told her directly, "I need to know that you want me, not just that you're willing. I need you to show me sometimes that you desire me, that you're thinking about being with me. Otherwise, I start feeling like I'm just bothering you." Here's the secret. Initiate regularly. Make it clear through your words and actions that you desire him. "I want you. I've been thinking about this all day. Can we go to bed?" Direct, clear initiation eliminates his anxiety about whether you actually want intimacy, creates psychological arousal, and makes him feel desired and masculine. The more you initiate, the more confident and responsive he becomes.
Here's what these 4 secrets reveal. Great sex for men over 60 has far less to do with physical factors and far more to do with psychological and emotional factors than most women realize. Your genuine enthusiasm matters more than your body. Emotional connection during intimacy matters more than technique. Clear communication about what you want matters more than quietly accommodating. Your initiation and visible desire matter more than perfect responsiveness. Linda, Margaret, Patricia, Helen, Ruth, Carol, Barbara, all of these women discovered that when they focused on these 4 elements, their intimate lives transformed. The sex became more satisfying for both partners. The emotional connection deepened. The anxiety that often plagues mature intimacy disappeared. And here's the most liberating part. None of these 4 secrets require a perfect body, flexibility, stamina, or complicated techniques. They require presence, authenticity, communication, and courage to be genuinely vulnerable and desiring. You already have everything you need to create the kind of intimacy that men over 60 consider great sex. Stop worrying about dimmed lighting and perfect positioning. Start focusing on being genuinely present, emotionally connected, clearly communicative, and openly desiring. That's what creates intimacy that he'll remember, crave, and cherish. Leave a comment below if these secrets surprised you or confirmed what you've experienced. Share this video with women who need to understand what actually creates great intimacy after 60. You deserve a passionate, intimate life. And now you know exactly what creates it. I'll see you in the next video.